Hello, everyone out there in podcast world. Hope you're having a wonderful day. You were listening to or watching Service Business Mastery Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Tersh, sitting virtually next to my co-host, Josh Crouch. And I don't know what that noise was. I'm
Quick, let's start
excited.
over.
Yeah,
Let's start over.
break.
Delete.
I'm super excited to talk to Ray. We have our guest today is Ray Higdon. I met him at a conference that I was at earlier this year, and some of the things that he was saying, actually, pretty much everything that he was saying on stage, totally resonated with me, and I knew it would resonate with Josh. And the biggest complaint I had about his presentation was that it was way too short. He only had like 25 minutes or so, and I was like, man, let's peel that onion back. Like there's so much stuff that it was just gold there he was talking about. And whenever you're at conferences like that, there's sometimes it's just a fire hydrant and you're just trying to collect as much as you can. But that was one conversation that I was like, I got to go deeper in this conversation. And immediately I pulled him to the side and said, hey, I want you to come on the podcast next time you have it available. And when was that, Josh? That's been a while.
That was end of May.
Yeah, our schedules have just finally gotten to where we can work together. And right, I don't even really know if that's the case, but it's really been really cool. Ray, first off, if you watch YouTube, if you're watching us on YouTube, obviously please subscribe, but check out his channel. And that is Ray Higdon. Is you can search him, or there is a URL also.
Yeah, we're gonna if you're watching it live, it's on the bottom of the page. Otherwise, we'll put it in the show notes as well at the end, so you can check that out. He's got a lot of. It's not just fully, like one blanket piece of content where just a rabbit hole into one thing. He's got some really cool stuff throughout his channel. He's got some pretty popular content out here too that people are really liking. So,
and I love the fact that I dove into his rabbit hole earlier today a little bit also, and the fact that he talks about follow-ups, and he's not in the air conditioning industry. I want to preface that with this conversation. We're going to talk a little bit about mental health and that kind of thing. But he is in the trades. He's in deals with the trades, or has dealt with the trades personally. So what he says, he's a man of action. And so I'm super excited to talk to him about that. What were you going to say, Josh?
I don't remember anymore. You just kept talking.
I know I do that sometimes. I get excited.
I know I was going to ask you. I was going to ask you just a brief snippet of what the talk was about at PodFest.
Oh, actually,
just to share it with everyone else, so that way they know. Or do you want to get into that after we?
Yeah, because it was talking about his life and going through hardships. And
okay,
whenever I talked to John a couple weeks ago, you weren't on the show. You were out of town at the baseball tournament, I think, in Myrtle Beach. But I talked to John, who is my life coach, one of my mentors, and we talked about things. Just about relationships and building up those, the 5 people that you surround yourself with. And whenever I was listening to Ray talk, I was like, man, it feels like I'm having a conversation with John at the same time. It was, he's a mentor of mine, and we've always kind of really, it's one of those things where I'd rather hear an honest truth that's brutal versus that lie that's like, yeah, comforting lie. That's, you know what I mean? So, but before we get started, partners with the show, you want to take it? You want to?
Yeah. I'll go over something new that's going to come out with Sarah. Just because they're continuously adding things regularly, they are going to have an API release soon, which means Zapier in automations will be a thing. So you can bet that Tersh and I will probably nosedive headfirst into that to find out more about it. That should be, Billy gave me a date for that, but that's going to really unlock some crazy potential, which actually, talking about automation and follow-up, which is something Ray will probably touch on today, is going to be what that allows you to do when you have open estimates or you have open work, stuff like that in your CRM. So Sarah's continuing to kind of push the envelope and get things out quickly, but they usually do it in a way that makes sure it's very thorough before they release it. So sometimes the releases aren't always as quick as maybe some other CRMs, but look forward to seeing that. And anyone that is part of Sarah's network, look forward to seeing that soon.
Yep. And Company Cam, if you're a technician and you're listening to this, I know that you have, if you go through your photos of in your phone looking for pictures of your kids, most of the times you're going to be scrolling past lots of air conditioning units, data plates, water heaters, pictures of houses in general. Company Cam really solves that issue. So it's a digital media, digital asset management tool. Man, I could not get that out of my mouth.
It's a dam. Just call it a dam.
It's a dam. But it really stores everything in the cloud, and you don't have to store it on your phone anymore. And also it keeps that metadata, which is really good too. For
yeah, and
SEO
I can tell you, so we use a dam for our digital marketing agency. It's not Company Cam because we don't do job specific stuff. We have clients send us stuff, but having a dam system is, I tell you, it's way better than storing them on Google or Google Drive. Like, you can do so much more actionable stuff with it. And if it just sits in your CRM, it doesn't do anything for you. Like, It doesn't help you remarket your services. So Company Cam is a great extension of what you guys are already doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Good job, Josh.
You're all.
Are you looking for valuable business advice to reach that 7-figure revenue mark? Do you want actionable tips to properly navigate through every business challenge you encounter along the way? Let Tersh Blissett and Josh Crouch be your guide in getting you to the top here at Service Business Mastery. Tune in as they sit down with world-renowned authors in business, leadership, and personal growth who share valuable insights about management, marketing, pricing, human resources, and so much more. Let their nuggets of wisdom gold guide you in owning a thriving, profitable, and ever-growing business. Here are your hosts, Tersh and Josh.
Welcome,
Hey,
Ray.
Hey, thanks for having me.
How are you?
I'm good. I was watching your cool video there. It's nice. I saw Brandon. I've spent a lot of time with Brandon Dawson. Good guy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was a totally unannounced thing too at one of our events. He showed up and we made a connection, and all of a sudden we were doing a podcast live in front of like a big audience with him, which was pretty cool. It's a little different than doing it remotely like we're doing now.
Right.
So, Ray, for those who don't know who you are, can you give a brief intro of yourself and a little bit about your background?
Yeah. So I'm someone that, I grew up with some, challenges, grew up in a very abusive home. And at the age of 12, I moved from Indiana, that was with my dad, down to Florida with my mom. And, I've always been an entrepreneur. 6th grade, I was selling airheads. I was getting them for 10 cents, selling them for a quarter, and I was moving 90 to 100 a day. They actually initiated, yeah, that's pretty good. They initiated
that is
a
awesome
policy at that middle school, and so sorry guys. But then I went. I listened to others around me, and I kind of went the corporate route out of high school. Had my challenges in high school too. But went the corporate route, and long story short, worked my way up, to a pretty decent paying position. It was a $80,000 a year salary. But I realized that I was miserable. I hated it. I looked at my boss and his boss and her boss, and they were all miserable too. They were making more money, but they were miserable too. And I decided that, I want to do my own thing. And so I had some friends that were making money in real estate. Now, this was back in 2005. And, 2005, Florida real estate, what could go wrong, right?
Right.
And so I jump into that and I start killing it, just moving as an investor. I was moving houses, I was buying rental properties, fixing flips and that kind of stuff. And then when the market crashed, I got really, really humbled. And that was some tough times. I went through a divorce, I went through foreclosure, and I lost everything. I mean, I sold furniture, you know, just got wiped out, got very depressed, drinking heavily. And it wasn't good. And there were a few things that helped me to alter how I thought and how I dealt with stress, to bounce back. And I, built a training company, an Inc. 5000 training company, generated tens of millions of dollars online now, speak at, large events all over the world. I'm speaking in November in Dubai for the Direct Sales Association. And, I got remarried. I've now been remarried for 10 years, and life is very, very different. I'm a better dad. I'm a better husband. I'm a better businessman. And I've just learned a lot along the way. And I hope to, bring some value to those that are going to watch this.
So let me ask you, and it's been several months since you presented, but and so I don't want to get this wrong. But whenever you were talking, you mentioned, I believe it was something about the frustration that you would feel as a business owner, and changing the mindset, just your mindset from, several years back till now, getting frustrated or aggravated with things, and moving towards where you're at now. Can you kind of go into that a little bit? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. I don't know the exact example, but just giving you my take on it. So one is you have to understand the importance of emotions, right? That they're so important, and most people have no idea how important they are. So for example, there are people that had something bad happen to them 20 years ago, 30 years ago.
That's it. Yeah.
And so, they had this bad thing happen. And, unfortunately, I have coached all kinds of people. I've coached people that were sexually abused, physically abused, like I was, people that have just been through very traumatic things. One of the people that was on our reality show, she'd actually been trafficked, and you just can't get much worse than that kind of stuff. And so we have this experience, and the end result of any experience is an emotion. And so you had this experience, you have this emotion, and most people, they relive that on almost a daily basis, right? But here's the rub. The rub is your mind doesn't actually know the difference between you remembering something or it actually happening to you. So let's say that someone betrayed you, right? I mean, I had an employee, she was our controller, kind of nice, right? But I had our controller steal $60,000 from us. And so if, that experience happened, I had an emotion, wasn't happy about it, wasn't cool. And, but what if I thought about that every day, right? And relive that experience every day. And so literally every day, someone is stealing $60,000 from me, and I'm reliving that same emotion. Well, how would I show up in the world? How would I talk to other people? I would not trust people, right?
Right. Be very pessimistic.
Let me run your reference. I'd be very pessimistic. I would think that people are out to get me, and I would show up in that way in my state of being, and people can feel that, right? And that's called a vibe. People, if someone comes, I've asked this question to a lot of different people, and I said, hey, if someone came up to you and they were selling something you wanted, but you just got a bad vibe, would you buy from them? Most people say no.
Yeah, probably not.
Right? And so if you have this traumatic experience or this negative experience that you're reliving over and over and over, you're feeling the emotions, you're firing and wiring, and you're reliving this every single day, you are sending off a vibe that you don't trust people, or bad things happen, or something like that. And so what many people have said over the years, what many of the greats, Neville Goddard, Yogananda, Jesus, if you dig into what they said, you holding that emotion is attracting more of that kind of emotion to you. Right?
Yeah.
What you're thinking about, you're bringing about. Right. And so what I've learned over the last few years, with some help for sure, didn't come up with it on my own, but with some help from people like Dr. Joe Dispenza, who I'm a very, big fan of, and I've learned a lot from him. The older gurus like Neville Goddard, Vadim Zeeland. And I've learned that when I have a negative emotion or I feel bad, whether it's a memory or a new thing, it's, that's just drawing my attention to unfinished work. It's drawing my attention to raise a trigger of, hey, this is a lesson you still need to learn, or this is something you need to work on. And so when I have a negative experience, or I have a negative emotion, or I'm just kind of feeling negative, then I notice it. I'm like, okay, what is it I want?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like this North Star, right? Or it's a pointer to the North Star of when I'm not feeling good, or when I'm thinking bad thoughts, or when I'm stressed out, frustrated, overwhelmed, disappointed, any of those words that are so common among so many. That's just hey, knucklehead, what is it that you actually want? And so I shift direction. I say, okay, what is my intention for the day? What is my intention right now? What is it that I actually want? And so it keeps me pointing to what I want. And that setting of intention of what do I want in my life? And you challenge the holding on to that negative, the holding on to that, familiar past. And so I hope that helps. Is that
well? So how do you avoid? Obviously, you don't want to make the same mistake and have another controller steal $60,000 from you.
Yeah.
So how do you avoid that happening while also not thinking about that constantly? Because I love what you say there, and I wholeheartedly believe, I agree with you that what you think about, you bring about. And if it's so much so that, like, when as a air conditioning company, we're like, oh, you can't do that because it hasn't been done before. You can't do this, or that doesn't fit into the status quo of our industry. And as long as you keep saying that, it's never going to happen. And then just by simply saying it can happen and it will happen, then it happens. Obviously you have to put forth the work, and you can't just say, I'm going to be a millionaire every single day and sit on the couch. But whenever, what do you do to make sure that you're still being protective, but you're not being pessimistic?
Yeah. So, I mean, in that particular example, here's how it went down, right? So we noticed a discrepancy, and we, my wife and I, and we confronted her, and we're like, hey, we're looking at the payroll, and we see this thing, and it looks like, and she goes, yeah, you got me.
Okay.
What? That's your
Not
response?
even denying it.
Like we're in a cartoon or something, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, oh, you got me. And and so this was the chain of events in my head, right? So first of all, I was mad, right? Because I had given money, to help her kids at school. She had been in my house. She'd held my kids. I first was mad for a couple minutes, right? And then after that, I did a scan. Did I deserve this? Did I mistreat her? Was I not nice to her? Was I, did I blow her off? Did I treat her like crap? And I came back with, no, I actually treated her really well. Okay. Yeah. And so it's like, okay, number one. And then number two is, okay, what can I put in place so this doesn't happen again? And so we shifted our accounting practices to just use a different system, and where this just can't happen, because there's too many eyeballs on it now. It's with a company versus an individual, and it just really unlikely for it to happen. So that's that particular example. But let me give you something not so specific, but will be much, much wider. All right.
Okay.
So and this was one of the tougher ones. All right. Or maybe even the toughest. So I remember I was in an argument with my wife, which doesn't happen very often, especially nowadays, because I'm way chiller. But I was in an argument with my wife, and like so many times, this thought came up, and the thought was, I'm not a priority. Now, that thought had probably come up every argument we've ever had. And so how does someone that isn't a priority show up? Well, if they're not a priority, then they just kind of shut up, right? Quiet treatment, silent treatment. Why even add anything to the argument if I'm not a priority, if I don't really matter?
Yeah.
Now, you don't have to do this level of work, but I've done the work to figure out where that came from. It actually came from when I was a kid. When I was a kid and being abused, family members knew about it, but no one did anything about it. And so I drew the conclusion, I created a paradigm that I'm not a priority, that I've projected on every relationship I've ever had in my entire life, personal, business, whatever. So if I would hire a digital agency, right? And so I would hire a digital agency, and then a part of me would look for, how come they're not paying attention to me? How come I'm not a priority? How come they're working on his account, not my account, right?
So you search for that.
Anytime I'm in an argument, why am I not a priority? And so that's something that when I became aware of that, and that's the key, is awareness, because we're on autopilot. All of those insights, all of those looking for me not being the priority, that wasn't a conscious decision. That was a subconscious thing. That was a paradigm that I was running in. It was just a program, an automated program. When I came aware of it, I said, ooh, I don't want to think that way anymore. I don't want to constantly be looking at, I'm not a priority. Yeah. And so that has you show up in a different way. Now, I may or may not be the priority for somebody, but I'm not projecting that anymore.
Right.
And I have one more example, if you want one more example.
Yeah, I do. Please. Actually, because I remember you speaking about a young lady having a block that couldn't close a deal or something to that effect. And whenever you asked about things, there was no problem. Everything was perfect in life. And then you had to really dive deep.
Yeah.
You want to?
Yeah. So the example you're talking about is, and it's funny. I was just Instagramming her back and forth, that lady. And so I've done a lot of live coaching where, someone gets on, I don't know anything about them, and I just ask them a few questions, and we figure out where they're stuck and what the problem is. And so with this lady, she's a rock star, right? And I mean, she used to be, I think she used to be in some kind of TV, like she was like literally a TV star. And so she'll get in this career, she'll do really, really, really good and just be amazing and dazzle everyone. And then she'll find something wrong and get out of there and go do something else. Right. And so her career looked like this. Right? Yeah. And so I know that's, patterns in your life are what shows you what your paradigm is. Right. And because your programs, they don't want to be figured out. They want to keep running because they're keeping you safe. Okay. They don't want you to figure them out. They don't want you to put them under a microscope and learn what they actually are. They want to keep running. But if you look at your patterns, you're like, why do I have these patterns? You have those patterns because of the paradigm, because of the programs. And so I asked her, I said, okay, tell me about your parents. And she said, oh, they were great. They were wonderful. And no trauma, no abuse. They were great to me. They're still together today. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I knew there was something there, but memory is a tricky thing. And this is something I've actually had to work on, is memory is a tricky thing in that your body will literally block memories to protect you. And so there are things that I've remembered through hypnosis or through other methods that were very negative experiences that I had literally blocked out, right? And so I figured that's the case with her. And so, I just kind of threw a little reverse psychology thing. I said, it's okay if you don't remember. And all of a sudden, and we were on Clubhouse, so I can't even see her. And all of a sudden
yeah.
she goes, I'm like, hello, you okay? You all right? And it's like silent for like a minute or so. I don't know if she's in a car accident. I don't know what's happened here. And she said, I just remembered as a little girl catching my mom cheating on my dad.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, I'm like, well, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, what do you mean that makes sense? What the hell does that do?
She's like, how does that relate to what
My
I'm
career
doing today?
choices. And she said, what the hell does that have to do with my career choices? I said, everything. Don't you see? So as a kid, she was feeling really good, right? She had perfect parents. They were together. They were loving. They were awesome. Nothing bad there. Everything's perfect. And then one day, and she was completely out of control. Her reality was crashed, torn apart, destroyed. So what is happening here, her program, her paradigm, is that she gets to a place where she feels really good. And then before they can pull the rug out from under her, because she's in control now that she's an adult, she gets out of there. And so
she
find
always has control.
Always in control now. I was out of control as a little kid. Not anymore. I'm in control now. But the problem is, yeah, you're in control, but the program is driving you. You're not driving yourself, right?
Yeah.
So she was
And
just
she
in
didn't even realize it.
chair.
Mm-hmm.
Say that again, Josh. Sorry.
And I was just saying, she doesn't even realize that that's happening. She thinks she thinks she's in control, and it's not actually. It's something that happened 20, 30, 40 years ago that is causing this.
And so, like, might there be times she should leave? Sure, right? But don't let that be an autopilot decision that you derive at because you feel good.
Yeah.
Because, there may be information that leads you to leave something. I'm not saying stick with one thing, forever, no matter what, but you just don't want the automation of that decision. And I went through that as well. One of my earliest paradigms that I figured out was I'll show you. So if someone doubted me, I'm like, oh man, let's go. Right. Oh, you don't think I can underwater basket weave? Oh man. Right? So
I'll be the best underwater basket weaver you've ever seen in your life.
I'll show you. And so, and here's, case in point, when I was like 19 or 20 years old, I went to my buddy Martin and I said, Martin, man, and he was like an IT guy. He knew computers, and this was a while ago. And I'm like, man, I need to learn computers because I don't know anything about them. And he's like, okay, left click. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, I don't even know what it means. Like, that's how out of it I was. And he says this comment, this very innocent comment. He goes, wow, you could never do computers. The next 7 years, I worked my way up into the IT field. I actually went to Redmond, Washington, and applied for Microsoft. I was about to take a job for their SQL Server team. And then one day I'm like, I don't even like computers. Why am I doing this? And it's because I had reached a point where people weren't doubting me anymore.
Yeah.
And so the problem with I'll show you is eventually you show them. And then you're like, well, what do I do now?
There's nothing left after that. It's like,
Nothing
what's
left.
the next thing?
Exactly.
Man, so
what am I doubted in now?
What you're saying hits home with me because, and Josh and I were talking about this the other day a little bit, but I would consider myself what I would consider a wartime leader. And so it's like when I started this business, nobody really had a remote business, a remote air conditioning service business or plumbing. And so everybody was like, you can't do that. It's not possible. You have to do X, Y, and Z. You have to have a warehouse for everybody to come to every morning. And I was like, all right, bet I'm going to do it. And then did it and, we grew, 600%, a couple of years. And then it's like, all right, I'm bored. Like, let's do something else. And it's like, I feel like it's pretty successfully completed. It's not a $50 million a year company, but it's done and it can be done by anybody now. It's
operational and you feel like it's okay. Like, what is next?
And that's the same exact way it was with the last company I had, that you couldn't make money by working, in our industry, it's the mindset currently is that you have to do less volume, but higher margins. And the other company that I have we only do property management companies. Like that's all we did. And so it was very high volume. Guys were running and gunning and low margins. And I was told that you can't make 15% net. I was like, all right, bet I'm going to make 15% net and, prove everybody wrong. And then as soon as we did, and as soon as it was automated, I'm out of there. Like I'm bored. Let's start another challenge. And it's like a glutton for punishment. As soon as something is running smooth, and I'm like, let's do something else.
You know what we should have done from the beginning when I said start over? I should have known this about Ray, and then we should have done a live coaching session, recorded it, and then sent it out to everybody. That would have been fun.
I mean, you're about to get one, dude. Because
we got time.
I'm about to solve a problem for you right now. You started that talk with "I'm a wartime leader."
Yeah.
Well, if you're a wartime leader, then you need war.
Yeah, need conflict.
So you're literally saying, bring on the war, bring on the turmoil. And so I would say two things for you. One, I wouldn't say I'm a wartime leader because I don't want war. Right? I want growth, right? I'm a growth leader. I'm a strategic growth person or whatever. I want growth, not war. And number two, have an end in mind. Like for you, maybe it's, hey, once we grow it here, we're going to sell it. Because service businesses are, very sellable to my understanding.
Yep, they are in 2022.
Like a lot of my buddy sold. He did really well. Sold his home services business. But I would just always have that next. What is that next step? In the absence of intention, we get bored. And when we get
100%. That's exactly what it is. It was, you can't do $1 million completely remote and not having an office. Oh yeah. Watch. You can't do 3 million a year. Okay. I'll show you. And then it's like, all right, this is getting boring because I never had, once I reached those targets, there wasn't something else to achieve for. And I know that about myself. I did little targets here and there, but really started focusing more and more on the podcast and really away from that business. And,
hey, Tersh, I got a challenge for you. I bet you cannot make us the number one podcast in Apple under the management section. Wink.
Prove you wrong. No, it's very, I understand what you're saying there. And just to not stigmatize myself in that thought process of I'm a wartime leader, changing that mindset. I guess that's,
I would just think bigger. I would just, and money is one aspect of it. At some point, it gets to where, okay, I got enough to get by and I'm doing fine. And so it's like more of what will you do with the money? Right. Yeah. So like one of our projects this year that we're making good progress on is building a hazard house for kids in foster care. Right. Mm-hmm. And so like thinking about what resonates with you that, might be a charitable thing, doesn't have to be, but what resonates with you, where at the end of the day, you say, dang, man, I'm really glad I built this. I'm really, really glad I did this thing. Mm-hmm. And so, that could be, like I had an intention. I saw some friends, speaking in Dubai, and I'm like, man, I'd like to get hired to go over there and, speak in Dubai and spread out there. And, and so that was an intention. And then a couple of weeks later, someone, reached out to me and they hired me to go speak there. And so like, I just think, constant setting of intentions, constant, looking at what will make me feel good. And when I was a workaholic, it was always next goal, next goal, next goal, next goal, next goal. Mm-hmm. But none of those goals actually made me feel any better. And so, $1 million a year, $1 million a month, $1 million weekend, $1 million day, like all of those things were great. And I'm just, piling up these stats and everything. But none of them made me feel any different. And so that's when working is actually a coping mechanism with you being afraid to spend time with yourself. And so now I spend a lot of time with myself. I do meditation, I do journaling every day. And so like, you gotta, when you realize that business goals aren't hitting what you hoped they would hit as far as making you feel better, then you got to kind of look at it a little differently. What would actually make me feel better? And so I'm not sure if that helps or not.
Well, yeah, it does. So we're talking pretty high level stuff here. As a business owner, there's a lot of business owners that are listening to the show and they have employees and team members. Is this something that you should even attempt to have a conversation with a team member about, or like where do we direct, like where do we go to help team members learn more about themselves?
First, it's you being the example. Okay. And so I would not go to team members to get them, you guys need to learn about yourself. Right? Like you need to learn about yourself. Yeah. And so when you show up as the example, then people say, I'll have what he's having. And so, by me changing, I've had, people that work for me, people, my wife, I've had people say, man, what is it that you're doing? So the question is, how can I start showing up in a way where others ask me, what are you doing differently? Something's different about you. And that's really, becoming familiar with yourself. A very simple process, because I know a lot of people are scared by meditation, right? And people think that because they don't understand how it works, so they think that, I can't do it, right? And that's only because their body is in control of them. So step one of meditation is tame the animal. So when I first started meditating, 2 minutes in, I'm fidgeting, I'm scratching my face, I'm stretching, I'm doing all this stuff. I'm not meditating at all. My mind is racing. And now I've done 4-hour meditations without moving a muscle. And because I've tamed the animal and I have to retame it every time. And so it's you telling the body, it's you telling the mind, I'm the master, I'm in control. But that's a little much for most people. One thing you could do right now is just every morning, I do this every single morning. Every morning I wake up and I write down, okay, what's on my mind? What are my thoughts? And I just, I take a couple minutes, not long.
I don't know if I have enough pages in a notebook for that.
Well, it gets better. The more you do this kind of thing, that it gets better. I just what are my top thoughts? What are my top 5-10 thoughts? And then it's, what are the thoughts, actions, and feelings I don't want to have? And so
I love that you mentioned that. If we think about the thoughts that we don't want to have, does that not
bring them about?
Yeah, bring them about. Exactly. Yeah.
So here's the issue. What people think is they think that suppression works. And suppression is still a connection of energy. Yeah. Right. Okay. So whatever you're suppressing, it's actually better for you to express. And so, there were times where I didn't feel like a good dad. And, me expressing that, not to other people, but, to myself, right? Me expressing that, hey, I don't want to feel this way. And so what are the thoughts, actions, and feelings I don't want to have? And what do I want to have? How do I want to show up today? What are my thoughts, actions, and feelings I want to have today? And it forces me to look at the day before. So sometimes I'm looking at the day before and I realize that I could have been kinder. I remember maybe 3 weeks ago, I was speaking in Vegas, and I remember, I flew and, I get to the hotel, and the guy that works the hotel, super kind, super nice. I wasn't interested. I was just, I wasn't rude. I wasn't mean, but I just wasn't interested. I wasn't kind. Yeah. And so upon reflection, the next morning, I looked at that and I'm like, I don't want to show up that way. Maybe that guy was having a bad day. Maybe he just found out his daughter has cancer. Right. I don't want to be that guy that's just not interested. Check me in, dude. I mean, I didn't say that to him, but I could have been kinder.
Probably gave off the vibe that you just, hey, just check in. I
Exactly.
really want to talk to you today.
And so there are days where my 6-year-old daughter triggers me. You know, she is strong-willed. She's got a big personality, and there are days where she pushes my button and triggers me. I don't want. She shouldn't be able to trigger me.
Yeah,
that's not her. That's me.
Yep.
No one can make you angry, but you can allow yourself to be angry based out of not being in mastery. And so every morning I'm looking at, how did I show up the day before? Was I kind to my wife? Was I patient with her? Was I, did I show up big on that interview? Did I hold back? Right. And so I'm looking at the day before, and you do that on a consistent basis. All of a sudden you're going to start showing up differently.
Now,
so that's a very simple few-minute process.
Well, what part is it that forces you to reflect on the day before?
How do I not want to show up?
Okay.
And so how do I not want to think, act, or feel? And that forces me to look at the day before, and I scan the day. Did I get agitated, irritated, disappointed, frustrated, overwhelmed? Did I get triggered? Did I get angry? Was I impatient? Was I not kind? Was I disinterested? Did I not play big? Right. And so it forces me to look. And what I've noticed is, number one, any of my negative emotions have become less. Right. So, in the past, maybe something would have pissed me off for an hour.
Mm-hmm.
There is nothing that pisses me off for more than a minute or so now.
Yeah. I love the thought process, or not love it, but I love the fact that someone mentioned this to me. I don't know the number. There's so many seconds in the day. Are you going to let 2 seconds, something that happened,
86,400.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah. Thanks, Josh. And are you going to let those 2 seconds ruin the other 86,100 and whatever it is left?
Yeah. No, it's a great concept, but some people have let 2 seconds from 38 years ago define themselves.
That's true.
It sounds silly when you say it. Like my first inkling was to chuckle too, but it's so true.
It is.
It is true.
And it's funny because we're talking about this. You start thinking about things in your life and patterns and certain things, but it is so true how you let these things affect
Fester.
how you are. Yeah, you don't think about. I don't necessarily think like, well, that caused me to do that today, but when you actually unpack it and talk about it, it's like, oh. You start thinking of things and remembering things. I did want to get to.
This is probably the one episode that I wish Julie wasn't watching.
I was just going to bring her up. She's been commenting and adding questions on the live feed. I'm like, I can't ignore her forever. So she just posted what we were just talking about. So when you have, and I'll read the question so that way anyone listening. She asked, how does it work for accountability of those feelings when you've expressed those types of negative emotions, maybe the day before, and you're reflecting towards people you care about?
Okay, so let me reread this. How does it work for accountability of those feelings when you've expressed those types of negative emotions towards people you care about, especially? So you will be shocked when you go to someone that you care about and you say, hey, yesterday I could have been more patient with you. Yesterday I could have been more kind. And I just want to apologize. And so you'll be shocked. And I've done that. I can't always do that with everyone, because like the guy at the hotel lobby wasn't there the next day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But with someone I care about, I mean, I've absolutely gone to my wife and said, hey, yesterday, looking back, could have been a little kinder to you, and I apologize.
And this was her follow-up in the feed, is like apologizing about it and talking about it, or letting it go.
Yeah, I mean, I don't make a big deal about it, but I just say, hey, could have been kinder. And every time my wife really appreciates that, because who does that? No one does this. No, it's just like, forget, they'll get over it. Right. And that's the problem, is some personality types don't get over it. They hold on to it forever.
Well, so that's exactly what Julie actually followed up with. And I know that's her personality. If I bring something like that back up, her feelings, it's there, it's back. That's the whole conversation again. So sometimes I am guilty of being like, I'm not going to do that again, but I'm not going to talk about that because I don't want to talk about all that again.
I mean, it's one level of accountability is you understanding that you are not your emotions. You are the master of your emotions, but most people don't know that. And so no one can make me feel a certain way. Like people can reject me, people can be rude to me, people can, steal from me, people, anyone can do anything, to me, but my reaction is my reaction. I own that. And so I don't blame someone for making me feel a certain way. I'm taking accountability by saying, hey, I could have been kinder. I'm not going to them and say, hey, yesterday. And this is the problem. Like with a lot of things get twisted that would be helpful, but they get twisted. So one of them is the love languages, right? Yeah. You know how most people use the love languages? They use them as a weapon.
Yep.
So they say, hey, I'm acts of service. How come you didn't do that? That's not the point of love languages.
Nope.
The point of love languages is for you to look outside of you and be able to please someone.
Yep.
It's not to demand how you be pleased,
mm-hmm.
but that's how it's used. And
that's something that John, my life coach and mentor that I've mentioned earlier in the show, one of the things he sat me down and we've gone through the love languages and everything. We know them for our kids and everything else. And it was like, think about it like a cup, and your job is to fill her cup, fill the kid's cup every day. And you fill it by showing them, their love language. And so it's very, very,
it's very helpful.
If you do it the right way
for others.
Yeah.
It is damaging to demand for yourself.
Yep. Absolutely.
That's I think that's a great point to end things on.
It is.
Ray,
such an amazing thing.
Before Tersh closes out, any of this type of content, do you have any of this stuff on? I haven't gone through as deep on your YouTube stuff. Do you have any of this stuff on your YouTube where people can take in some of this stuff and maybe reach out to you that way or through Instagram?
Oh yeah, we have this kind of content on our YouTube and Instagram. Okay. My main audience that I serve is people in the network marketing space. But I have a lot of insurance people, a lot of service people. I actually have a funny story. I don't know if I shared this about air conditioning. So back when I taught advertising, and we actually did advertising for small businesses, I finished this quick workshop. I did like an hour workshop, and this guy comes up to me and he goes, hey man, I'm in air conditioning. How much to hire you so you won't work with anyone else?
Exclusive.
And I'm like, oh, you mean like an exclusive where I only work with you? He goes, no. We do the stuff you're talking about, but I don't want you to do it for any other air conditioners. And so I'm like, $5,000? And he's like, okay. And so he made me sign a 5-year, do nothing for anyone else in air conditioning contract, handed me $5,000. I did nothing.
Wow.
I thought that was funny.
Probably if he said okay too fast, probably should have said 10,000.
I know I did. I'm like, I wonder what his
that's that moment right away after you're like, oh shit, I guess that was too cheap.
Yeah.
You didn't even have to think about it.
That's right.
Man, Ray, we really appreciate you coming and spending time with us. And,
thanks for having me. It was
absolutely.
a lot of fun.
This was really great, Ray. Thank you.
Cool, man.
If anybody has any questions, follow them on YouTube and on Instagram, and you're going to learn a lot. I like I said earlier, I was checking out videos today. I mean, I've checked them out in the past, but I was even deep dive, and it's one of those things where I'm like, I'm gonna watch one, and then it's like, oh yeah, this is good, let's keep going. And
nice.
So honestly, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to Ray or Josh or myself, and we'll try our best to get you in contact with Ray. But thank you again, Ray, for coming and joining and spending time with us. And I know tons of people got value out of this. And thank you. Great. If you're listening to or watching this episode, please leave a review. Subscribe if you haven't already subscribed, and we look forward to talking to you again next week. Have a wonderful and safe week. We'll see you later.
We'll see you guys.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Service Business Mastery. Now that you are equipped with essential business advice from this impactful conversation, you are one step closer to becoming the successful owner of your dreams. If this episode has been helpful to your business journey, don't forget to subscribe to the show, leave a rating, and share it with other owners as well. Visit servicebusinessmastery.com to learn more.